Welcome everyone to another exciting episode of Stanford's Masters of Creativity. I'm Jeremy Utley, one of the co-hosts and co-producers of the program. It is awesome to see all of you joining today from Los Angeles and Seattle and Chicago and India and Ireland and New York and Arizona and Greenville and the Philippines and Guatemala. All over the place. We are delighted to get to convene such an incredible, enthusiastic community of practice. It's been a lot of fun learning with you all over the last year and a half, and I know that today is going to be no different. We are joined by none other than Vanessa Van Edwards, while she's on sabbatical in Portugal, by the way. Okay, so I just want to say we are hugely indebted to Vanessa, and I'll put her on the spotlight here so we can all see her. Hi, Vanessa. And I just want to give a brief introduction, and I want us to dive into the content for today. So we have plenty of time for Q&A, etc. I'll add myself so that Vanessa's not there by herself. So, okay, Vanessa Van Edwards is a multi-time best-selling author, and she's a renowned behavioral researcher on professional communication and leadership. Her YouTube videos have been viewed by more than 50 million people, which is just remarkable to me. And that's a number which is constantly going up, by the way. Her work has been featured in national and international media, including Inc., Entrepreneur Magazine, CNN, CBS, and many more. Her book, Captivate, was translated into over 16 languages, and her latest book, Cues, Master the Secret Language of Charismatic Communication, was an instant bestseller. It is our distinct privilege to welcome Vanessa to the stage. Would you please join me in giving Vanessa fireworks applause, Stanford MOC style?
Oh,
yeah, oh yeah, and if
I like this.
Vanessa, if you put your screen in gallery view, you're going to see an explosion of appreciation. Not to give too much away, but I'm just saying, get ready, get ready.
Oh, and I love a hand gesture. Oh my goodness. I'm so honored and excited to be here with all of you. When Jeremy asked me to share my research, it's such a privilege because I get to study highly charismatic people. And the reason I study charismatic people is because I am a recovering awkward person. So as an awkward person, I've always been fascinated by likable, memorable, captivating people that we're drawn to. So I thought I'd start a little icebreaker. I've heard y'all are down for anything. So if you wouldn't mind, get your fingers warmed up, and in chat, I would like you to please share who is the most charismatic person you know. This could also be the most charismatic person you know of. So someone that you admire, who you don't know, but who has that quality, that charisma that you're drawn to, that's magnetic, that captivates and captures everyone you meet. By the way, it's very interesting. I love always seeing, we have 2 Obamas already. Always interesting seeing what people put in the chat. So highly recommend checking those out. See if there's any common ones, if you will actually already list the same people. So while everyone puts that in chat and you share those answers, I want to actually take a look at what the research has to say about highly charismatic people. So I've always been curious about, as an uncool kid, the cool kids, what makes someone highly charismatic? And luckily, there's some fascinating research that looks at what actually makes someone charismatic. And this comes from Dr. Susan Fisk from Princeton University. What Dr. Fisk studied is that highly charismatic people, they actually have a very specific blend of 2 traits. That what differentiates highly charismatic people from control groups is they have the perfect blend of 2 traits. And the 2 traits that matter the most for charisma, very simply, warmth and competence. And here's what she found. She found the reason that we're drawn to highly charismatic people is because they're signaling or cueing 2 of these traits at the same time, and they have to be in equal measure. So first comes warmth. People who signal high warmth or cue for high warmth are constantly signaling signals of trust, of friendliness, of likability. That warmth makes you immediately want to get closer to them. But at the very same time, along with their warmth, they're also signaling high competence. So highly competent folks signal power. They're impressive. We see them as capable and efficient. And so not only are we drawn to warm people, but the competence makes us want to rely on them. And this comes down to 2 fundamental questions that we ask about people. And this happens the moment we see someone on a screen, the moment we meet someone in a room, even the moment we hear someone on the phone, we're very quickly trying to answer two basic questions about someone. First, can I trust you? And that's warm. And second, and immediately following, and by the way, Dr. Susan Fisk found they are chronological. The next is, can I rely on you? If we can very quickly answer those two questions about someone, we are drawn to them. That is the definition of charisma. What's incredible is when we ask people, so at Science of People, it's my company, we've asked people, what is your ideal first impression? We get hundreds of words: funny, impressive, likable, charismatic, outgoing. But actually, when it comes down to it, Dr. Susan Fisk found that 82% of our impressions of people are simply based on these two traits. That's a huge majority. That if you want to come across as easier to bond with, if you want to make connections with people, if you want to build rapport, the two traits that are the most important for that are warmth and competence. So to break this down, I want to share a little graph of how this works. So all of us can be placed on the scale. In fact, one of the first activities we're going to do, so you can start to prepare yourself, is I would like you to place yourself on the scale. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the scale, and I want you to think about which part of the scale sounds most like you. So highly charismatic people, they're in the quadrant with the star. High warmth and high competence. Again, they're constantly signaling you can trust me and you can rely on me. And we really like being with those people. By the way, Dr. Susan Fisk's research, this is where I got really hooked, not just about people, it's also about brands. When we look at an advertisement, a company's website, a social profile, we're also trying to decide if that company is charismatic, if we can trust them and we can rely on them. So we can even place brands on this chart. So the charisma zone is where that star is. That's the sweet spot. Here's the problem. Most people do not fall in that upper quadrant. That's why highly charismatic people are so hard to find, why they're so memorable, is because it's hard to have a perfect balance of those two traits. Most of us, oh, by the way, this is the most common answer we get is Oprah for the highly charismatic quadrant. So I call this the Oprah zone, right? Or if Oprah isn't your person, it could also be the Ted Lasso zone. Is that depending on your flavor of charisma? I picked these two very, very distinctly charismatic people because Ted Lasso and Oprah are pretty different. So how is it they're both charismatic? We're going to talk about how that works. Here's the problem. Most of us do not fall into that upper quadrant. Most of us have an imbalance in our warmth and competence. What this means is that when we're interacting with people, we might be able to answer one of the questions, you can trust me or you can rely on me. But if we can't answer both questions, people have trouble depending on us. And so that imbalance of too high warmth with too little competence or too high competence, too little warmth can create a lot of our people problems, our miscommunications, why we're not getting along with certain people, why we don't click with certain people. It's because we have an imbalance in our warmth and our competence. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to do our first activity to help place ourselves in the scale. So if you wouldn't mind getting out a pen and paper, or if you have a really good memory, you can do this in your memory too. It's a good memory test. So if you wouldn't mind getting out a pen and paper, we're going to go through a pair of 6 pairs to go through together. On your piece of paper, please number 1 through 6. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read 6 pairs of statements. I want you to pick A or B, whichever one sounds most like you. Now, no one's going to see these answers. I promise they're just for you. The point of this is for you to be really honest with yourself. So this isn't necessarily you on your best day. This is you on your real day. So you have to pick one, only A or B, which sounds more like you. Let's start with number 1. Which sounds more like you? A, I am known for my kindness. B, I am known for my skills. Which one sounds more like you? Pair number 2. By the way, don't overthink these, right? Just the one that first comes to your mind. Pair number 2, write down A or B. A, people think of me as a caretaker. B, people think of me as an expert. Which one sounds more like you? Pair number 3, which one sounds more like you? Very simply, A, I am patient. B, I am efficient. Hard to pick just one. All right, pair number 4. This is a hard one, I think. A, people sometimes interrupt me. B, people sometimes tell me I am hard to talk to. Which one sounds more like an issue you struggle with? Again, no one will see these answers, I promise. Okay, number 5. A, I am compassionate. B, I am impressive. This is a hard one because it's not what we wish to be, it's what we are. Last pair. A, I am considered a great team player. B, I'm considered a great team leader. Which one sounds more like you? All right, don't overthink these. So we're gonna do some basic math, I promise, nothing too hard. We're gonna add up your A's, add up your B's, and here's probably where you fall. Now we're gonna get more specific about this, but I wanted to start off with this scoring before I describe each of the areas. So if you had more A's, you are likely higher in warmth. You likely have a little bit of an imbalance. If you are higher in B's, you are likely higher in competence. Anyone have a perfect score? Anyone perfect 3 of 3? So if you have a perfect score, you probably have a balance. We're gonna double check that. Now, there's one small extra section, which is if I was going through those pairs and nothing quite felt like you, that's okay. We're gonna get you out of that zone. That's what I call the danger zone. And that's where I was for many, many, many years. So if you struggle with awkwardness like I do, that can be difficult because it means you don't feel like you signal enough warmth or competence. And don't worry, we're gonna talk about it. So let me go through the different areas of the charisma scale. By the way, I wanna make sure, are your faces covering some of my bullets? Should I move them or is it okay for everyone? I think it's okay. Okay, good. Jeremy, I was looking at you. It's okay. You can see them.
Totally perfect. Yeah, 100%.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so let's talk about different parts of the scale. So depending on where you fall, I want you to think about if this sounds like you. And bonus, if you can also think about people in your life who sound like this. So the other activity we're going to do is, if you wouldn't mind, on your piece of paper, can you just briefly draw this charisma scale for me? So these 4 quadrants: warmth, charisma zone, competent, and danger zone. What I'd like you to do is begin to identify people in your life. So if I'm describing highly warm folks and you're like, I know that person, that's my partner or my mom or my teacher, I want you to put them in that warm zone. And so as I go through each of them, I want you to begin to fill out the people in your life along with where you fall. Okay, so if you're highly warm folks are great team players. They're collaborators. They are constantly signaling trust and collaboration. Typically, they have a superpower, which is that people love opening up to them. Now, this can be both a superpower and a liability. You know that you are high in warmth if people love to tell you their life story. You are high in warmth if you sit down on an airplane and the person next to you just verbal vomits all over you. Right? Just tells you everything about themselves. They love to open up to you. Why does this happen to highly warm people? You are cueing and signaling to others, trust me, tell me, open up to me. And so what happens is people do open up to you, but sometimes that can be a little bit too much. So some of the downsides of being highly warm is that people tell you a lot. Sometimes this is what's really hard, is if you have an imbalance with too much warmth and not enough competence cues, people see you as friendly, compassionate, collaborative, but you're not always taken seriously. People interrupt you. People don't believe your ideas. And so people want to hang out with you. They want to be with you. They want to be your friend, but they don't value your opinion or they don't take your ideas as seriously. Highly warm people also struggle with people pleasing. So, and this is a very interesting way to think about this. Highly warm people have a very distinct people struggle. They really want to be liked. The problem is for folks who really want to be liked, it can get in the way of their need to be respected. And so they are constantly struggling with signaling high warmth, but not enough of signaling getting respect. And that's what leads to overcommitting. So if you know a highly warm person in your life, here's how you know if you have a highly warm person. You ask a highly warm person, hey, do you want to hang out next week? And they're like, of course, yes, definitely. And they cancel last minute. And that is because a highly warm person, they really, really want to say yes, and they tend to overcommit because they struggle with people pleasing and boundaries. If this sounds like you can place yourself in that warm scale or sounds like someone you know. Let's talk about highly competent folks. And by the way, this is what you're cueing to others, not necessarily what you are. It's the cues that you're sending out to the world. So people who send a lot of competence cues are constantly sending cues of, take me seriously. I'm impressive. I'm capable. I'm efficient. So for highly competent people, they are taken very seriously. They also really value respect. You know you're a highly competent person, by the way, if people always think you're in charge. So I have someone in my life who's very highly competent, and no matter where he is, people always ask him for directions. They always ask him where the bathroom is. They always ask him for rules because he is cueing that he's in the know. The funny thing about highly competent folks is typically they like to be in the know. Knowledge is their superpower. They really want to know because they've been able to use that knowledge to cue out competence. There's some weaknesses, of course, some struggles for highly competent folks in that on teams, they like to be in the know. They often are in the know, but they really want to be right. In fact, their need to be right can sometimes get in the way of their desire to be liked. So sometimes their struggle is they're struggling with, I really want to be right. I want to get it right. And that can sometimes sacrifice likability. Sometimes highly competent folks who are very high on the competence scale, people see them as cold or intimidating. Why? They are constantly cueing high competence. Without enough warmth, highly competent people are seen as smart and capable and powerful, but not always trustworthy, not always collaborative, cold or intimidating. So it's important to have this balance because it helps us be both liked and respected. So if you ask a highly competent person, if you remember how we talked about, if you ask a highly warm person, you want to get together this weekend, they say, yes, of course. And sometimes cancel last minute. You know what a highly competent person does? So if you ask a highly competent person, want to get together this weekend? They ask a bunch of questions. Where? How long? Who's coming? What do I need to wear? I'm not sure. What's required? Who's going to pay the bill? And that's because they want to be in the know. They want to make sure that whatever they sign up for, they can get it right? This is the most important aspect for my highly competent folks. And by the way, if I was describing this and this sounds like someone in your life, this is what we have to pay particular attention to. This is directly from the research. Competence without warmth is likely to leave us feeling suspicious. This is the challenge of highly smart people. Highly smart people, they focus a lot on their book smarts, on their IQ. They want to be impressive. They want to share their knowledge. The problem is if we can be the most competent, knowledgeable, smartest person in the room, but without trust and without warmth, people do not believe in our smarts. So the reason why highly charismatic people, we're drawn to them so much is because we rely on them. We know they're smart, but we also trust their smarts. Just for fun, and because I'm a huge Harry Potter fan, do we have any Harry Potter fans in the room? Here's a very simple way to sort of think about this framework. I believe, and this is anecdotal, this is not based on the research, I think that really great narratives tap into this framework. You'll notice that really great stories, movies and books, they have one character in each section. So, Hermione is the ultimate highly competent character. People don't always like her because she has to be right. An inside Harry Potter joke is it's Leviosa correcting people on how to say the right spell. You have Ron Weasley, who's a highly warm character. People don't always listen to his ideas. They don't always take him seriously, but boy, oh boy, do you like him. And then of course, typically the hero falls into the charismatic zone. Anyone guess who's in the danger zone? Do we have any guesses? Who's in the danger zone? Voldemort, of course, right? He shall not be named. Sometimes people say Snape, which is also a good answer. I share this because I think that sometimes it's helpful to think about archetypes for characters if you're having trouble putting them in different boxes. Let's talk about the Voldemort zone for a second, the danger zone. So this is where I was for a long time. The danger zone does not come from a lack of warmth or competence. The danger zone comes from under signaling our warmth and competence. The danger zone comes from people who are very smart and very warm, but are afraid to show it. So what's happening now, especially more than ever, is when we go stoic, when we become unreadable, which a lot of people mistakenly think makes them look powerful. There's this mistaken belief, especially recently, that if we're sterile, if we're stoic, if we don't show our emotions, that makes us look powerful. But actually, under-signaling makes people nervous. When we under-signal, people don't feel like they can grok what we're saying. We don't feel like we can get the cues to see who they are. So under-signaling actually causes people to doubt, dismiss, and underestimate us. Cues, signaling warmth and competence, tells other people how to treat us. So when we signal high warmth and competence, it tells people, yes, You can trust me and you can rely on me. We don't send enough of those signals. That's what puts us in the danger zone. It's actually being sterile. This was me for a long, long time. This is my wonderful third grade picture. I joke I'm a social vegan. I avoid meat. I worked very hard on that pun. I'm not sure if my love of puns also contributes to my lack of friends. It's highly possible. So this is my problem, which is that I was scared. So I under-signaled because I was afraid of being judged or rejected. And that, of course, caused me to be more judged and rejected. So if you're in the danger zone, you are not alone. So I want to do our next activity. So, okay, now that I've gone through the different areas of the zone, if you feel comfortable, would you mind putting in chat where you think you fall? Are you higher in warmth, higher in competence? Are you a balance? Are you in the danger zone? And that's okay. Welcome to the danger zone. I know how we can get out of it. So if you wouldn't mind sharing where you think you are. I think it's interesting, by the way, to watch the chat and see if there's similarities. So I do a lot of corporate trainings. And I've noticed if I do an all hands training, so a lot of people in the company, we get a huge variety of responses. If I do individual teams, like for example, let's say that I'm doing IT or the engineering team, I get very similar answers, right? In IT or engineering, we tend to get a lot of high competence. In marketing and HR, we tend to get a lot of high warmth and a lot of emojis and a lot of exclamation points. So I'm curious to see if there's any patterns in chat. Second question, and this is where we really begin to put this knowledge into action. Who do you typically interact with? So here's what I want you to do. On your chart, I want you to place yourself where you think you fall. This is a spectrum, right? So you can be in the charisma zone, but a little higher in warmth or a little higher in competence. So where do you think you fall? Are you on a border or on a borderline? So place yourself. And then I want you to think about the 5 to 10 people you interact with most. So who are the 5 to 10 people you interact with most, both professionally and personally? And I want you to begin to place them on the scale. Are they near you? Are they opposite you? What you'll find as you do this exercise is that the people you might have the most miscommunications with, the most people problems with, are in opposite parts of the spectrum as you. And that's because if you're a warm communicator, you come at interactions with warmth. Highly warm people, oh, you love stories and rapport and chit chat. You ask about the weekend. Highly competent people, they are allergic to small talk. They don't want to talk about chit chat. They want to get right to the agenda. Neither of these are right or wrong, but they indicate how you might have some basic communication or wiring differences of how you communicate. So I want you to begin to fill out your chart as I go through the next section. What's important here is I want to share with you how to be higher in warmth and competence, not just for you to be more charismatic, but also to trigger other people's charisma. What the research finds is that charisma is incredibly contagious. So that the reason why we like to be around highly charismatic people is because we want to catch it. If someone's signaling high warmth and high competence, we want to catch that high warmth and competence. And so my secret, not so secret, mission for doing this work is, yes, I want you to be the most charismatic person you possibly can. But secondarily, I want you to also trigger others' warmth and competence. That if you show up as your warmest, most competent self, that helps your clients and your family members and your friends and your colleagues also be their warmest and most competent self. And I think that's the greatest gift. So since we don't have a ton of time today, I picked one section, one typical type of cue that is the fastest way that we signal charisma. So when we talk about different cues, these are the social signals we send to the world. There are 4 different modes of cues. So there's nonverbal, our body language, our facial expressions, our posture, our gestures. There's verbal, so the words we use, which we're going to talk about today. There's vocal, the sound of our voice, the quality of our voice, our tone, our pitch, our cadence. Yep, even those signal warmth and competence. And the last smallest one is imagery, the colors we wear, what's in our background, the signals or brand images on our website, our logo, our profile pictures, those also signal warmth and competence. So I thought today, because so much of our work is now remote, we're emailing more than ever, we're texting, we're slacking, we're chatting, we're tweeting, we're gramming. There's more of them. TikToking. Is Periscope still a thing? I don't think so. But we're constantly using our words. Jeremy's like, no, I don't think so. We're constantly using our words, both in written communication, on the phone, and in person. our words are the one mode of communication that doesn't go away. So I thought we'd start with this one. So the words we use in our emails, spoken content, calls, profiles, chats, text, slides, marketing materials, websites, profiles, those all cue others on how they should think about us and how they should treat us. So I'm going to describe a little study. This study completely blew my mind, so I wanted to start off with it. We often think about words in terms of communicating our ideas, but we don't often think about how our words change behavior. So it's a very simple study that they did. They brought two groups into their lab and they asked them to play a game, a prisoner's dilemma kind of game. But they split them up into two different groups. The first group, they said, let's play a game. And they said, we're going to play the community game. And they went on to explain the rules of the game. They had all the participants play the prisoner's dilemma, and they recorded the results of how many people shared versus took the profits. The second group, same study, same lab, same teacher. The only difference was they said, we're going to play the Wall Street game. And they went on to describe the exact same game, same rules, same lab, same everything. They had them play the game and recorded the results. This was one word switch, community game versus the Wall Street game. Can you guess what happened? So people who played the Wall Street game, on average, shared a third of their profits with other players. People who were told they were playing the community game shared 2/3 of their profits. This is one word changed how people played, behaved, and collaborated. We don't realize that how we position our ideas, ourselves, and our services can change the way people act, behave, and treat us. I think this is where creativity comes from. I think that when we talk about being charismatic, very highly charismatic people are constantly stimulating and triggering different emotions. They're thinking about emotions and not just outcomes. And so I think that if we want to inspire creativity, if we want to be more creative, we actually have to be more creative with the cues that we are using. Here's how this works very basically. If we want to be higher in warmth, we should use more warm words. If we want to cue warmth, trigger warmth, stimulate warmth, we can use words like community. So words like friend, connect, cheers, open, together, excited, collaborate, happy, best, both. Those are words that give us the warm and fuzzies. Now, this is more art, not science, okay? It's hard to exactly put words into two different categories, but warm words make us want to collaborate. They make us want to trust. They make us want to build rapport. It actually changes our behavior to think about these warm words versus competent words make us want to get it done. So competent words trigger our dopamine responses. This makes us want to act. It makes us want to be motivated. Words like productive, brainstorm, effective, get ready, efficient, lead, knowledge, streamlined. Those are words that make us want to act, want to get us motivated. When we use warm words, that actually changes people's perceptions of us and also changes how they act. When we use competent words, it changes people's competent views of us and also how competent they are themselves. I want to give a very, very basic example, calendar invites. So I don't know about you, I open my calendar multiple times a day. It's how I start my week. It's how I start my day. It's how I end my day. And one thing that I've noticed is that when I look ahead at my calendar, I am triggered by the way the calendar invite is set up. And what's happening is more and more, you have things like call, meeting, conference, one-on-one overview. Most people's calendars are filled with what I would call danger zone words. These are words that are completely sterile, right? These days, if you have back-to-back Zoom meetings and calls, they all blend together. So here's my very first, very small action step. I want you to think about what you want to trigger, what kind of emotion you want to bring up with the people you're with. So when they look at your calendar invite, when they open up the email for your meeting or your call or your conference, what do you want to set them up for? Is it the community game or is it the Wall Street game? Can we think about collaborative sessions, strategy session, goal meetings, creative times, accountability hour, 2022 wins? Every single time that someone sees your email in their inbox, reminding them about that meeting or opens up that calendar, you're actually setting them up for success by using words that wake us up, by using non-sterile, non-autopilot, non-boring words. This not only helps you be more charismatic and purposeful, it also helps them be more charismatic and purposeful. The next thing I want to try is what I call an email audit. So this is going to be my homework, if you don't mind, for today. It's totally optional. The most powerful thing that you can do is see how you're coming across to others. So the very first part of this class, we talked about where you think you fall on the charisma scale. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to see where you come across in your communication. You can think or want to be the warmest, most competent person in the world, but if we're not communicating with that warmth or charisma, it's very, very hard to be able to signal that to others. So here's what we're going to do is for your homework, I want you to please open up your email sent folder. Now, it's kind of interesting, by the way, is when I bring people into our office and I ask to see their email sent folder, first of all, they always freak out. They're like, ah. And we open up their email sent folder. And if we count the number of warm words they use versus the number of competent words we use, we can almost always accurately predict where people would place them on the charisma scale. So the kind of words that you're using in your emails are signaling to others where you are in your warmth and competence. So I'm going to open up your email sent folder and please pull up a recent important message. By the way, if you want to, if you're time to do this right now, don't check your inbox. Don't check your inbox. Just open up your email sent folder. I want you to pull up a recent important message. The reason I say this is because we can't always use charismatic words in every single email, but I want you to pull up a message that you spent some time on, you spent some time crafting. So pull up a recent important message. What we're going to do here is I want you to count how many warm words did you use and how many competent words did you use. So again, this is art, not science, but warm words, they trigger the warm and fuzzies. Competent words make you want to get it done. One of two things will happen in this exercise. I've done this exercise with thousands of people. Is one, you'll find that you can easily pick out, I'm very warm with this person, or I'm very competent with this person. So we need to count them out. Or you'll find no warm or competent words at all. And this is a problem that's happening, is that as we email more and more, I think the creativity and the charisma is sapped from all of our communication. We're tired. And so we get to an email and it becomes incredibly sterile. A little note here is emojis. So exclamation points, emojis, smiley faces, hearts, words like whoop, yay, fab, and wow, those all count as one warm point. So if you have 3 exclamation points, that's 1, 2, 3 points in the warm scale. How about percents, numbers, graphs, and dollar amounts? Those are all highly competent. So if you have a percent, a number, a graph, a chart, a dollar amount, they'll give that 1 point for competence. I had to share this. I thought this is so funny. So Tim Urban is a very highly competent blogger. And I'm curious, by the way, for my highly competent folks, if this resonates with you, one thing that we've found is that highly competent folks, it is physically painful for them to put exclamation points in their emails. Like it's physically painful for them to add that kind of exclamation. So Tim Urban says, I spend a lot of time deciding which sentence in the email is going to have to take one for the team with the exclamation point. Does this anyone find this is physically painful? Now, Jeremy is like, yes, it's physically painful. Now, warm folks, you have the opposite problem. Here's a warm response, right? Matt, I always start with an exclamation point after every sentence, then realize, wait, they can't all have exclamation points. I sound like a lunatic. Then pair them back one by one until only a single exclamation point remains. If you're a highly warm person, give me an exclamation point in the chat. I know you want to, just like 1 or 2. Give me your favorite emoji. That's fine too. So this is a very small social skill, right? It's a very, very small aspect of communication. How many exclamation points do you use in an email? But even this is dictated by your warmth and competence. Even that decision of how loud we should be in an email, caps or exclamation point, changes based on our warmth and competence, and it changes how people perceive you as well. Before I end, I want to give 2 examples. I want to show the difference between a sterile email and a warm and competent email. I think that one of the problems that we have is that we're so overloaded with our communication that we end up, it all blends together. This problem states it perfectly. Apologies for my delayed response. I thought about emailing you back every day for the past 2 weeks, but I just didn't. This is the problem that we're facing. I think the reason why we're struggling with burnout, why we're struggling with information overload, is because we have sapped all the charisma, all the creativity from our communication. And so when we have sterile emails, if you went into your email sent folder, and by the way, if you're willing to do 5 of your recent important messages, it will give you a nice look into how many different cues you're using. If you're finding, wow, you're not using a lot of warmth and competence, and you're having trouble getting fast responses, you're having trouble with people connecting with you, you're having trouble closing or selling or building rapport, it could be because you're lacking any of that warmth and competence. Here's an example. So this is an email I'm ashamed to say I used to send all the time. And it sounds like most emails that are sent. Sterile. We're all set for the meeting next week. I'll prepare an overview and sample proposal for you to look at. Then we can review them. Let me know if you have any questions. Now, here's an example of a warm email. Now, I've underlined all the warm cues, right? So the exclamation point, notice the warm words. I'm showing this because it's the same email sent in multiple different ways. And by the way, you're welcome to screenshot if you want to take an example. So here's the sterile one. This is the one we don't want to use, right? There's no charisma cues, there's no warmth, there's no competence at all. Here's the warm one. Hi, Rod. I absolutely loved connecting with you yesterday about the new proposal. As always, it's great collaborating with you. I think we're onto something truly special. I'll be able to finish my part today and then we can review together. Smiley face, best, Andrea. Now let's look at the same email with all competence. Here's all competent. Dear Rod, thanks for the powerful brainstorm session yesterday. This new proposal is absolutely spot on. I think we're really onto something next level with it. I'm pushing through my part by the end of the day, and then I'll shoot it over. Onwards, Andrea. Do you notice how these all say the same thing, but they feel completely different? Right? The sterile email is much harder to reply to. It's much less memorable, whereas the warm email makes us feel the warm and fuzzies, makes us feel like we really want to connect, whereas the competent email makes us want to get it done or think about getting it done. Neither of these are right or wrong, but I think that the way that we come across to others changes how they feel about us and also changes how they're going to act with us. So my final one, we don't have time for vocal cues today, is to finish your email audit. Please try to do your 5 different important email sent messages. And we'll end, hold on one second, Dad. Please. My dad is opening a bottle of wine. That is what you're hearing in the background. If you heard the pop of the bottle of wine, thank you. Okay. All right. I would love to take questions. I mean, it's not for me. It's not for me. So
it's 5 o'clock somewhere, as they say.
I mean, it is actually 7 o'clock here in Portugal. So there you go. If you heard like the doop, doop, doop.
Yeah, that's great. Better just to call it out. That's great. That's great. First of all, I want to say thank you, Vanessa, for this you've given us good homework, which is great. I know all of us are going to go into our inboxes and do a quick audit, which I think is tremendously practical and helpful. The other thing I want to do is give you a chance to get into the chat if you want to look at questions.
Yeah, this was a great comment from Garrett, which is often a question I get, which is I find exclamation points are painful in business emails, but personal email are much easier. So kind of nuanced idea to this is thinking about you can be different professionally and socially, of course, right? You know, with my daughter, I'm much higher in warmth. In my business settings, I'm much higher in competence. And actually highly charismatic people are quite flexible with their charisma scale, right? That charisma zone is a zone, right? You can flex in that zone to be a little higher in warmth around when your goal is warm. So you can be around warm people, you dial up warmth. If your goal is rapport and collaboration and openness and creativity, great. You can dial up that warmth. Whereas if you're in a negotiation or an interview, you want to be productive, you got to get things done, you're with a highly competent person, you can dial up competence. So the nice thing about this is they are zones and scales. And so you can absolutely, if you want to add some nuance to it, you could add a dot for yourself at work and a dot for yourself at home, right? Which is a little bit different based on where you are. And that's actually a super strength of highly charismatic people is they can dial like a thermostat, you know, where they want to be to fit their goals. Let's see, did I miss any other questions? Question from Ed. When working with others who are in a different mode, if we give the right cues, will they then mirror us? Okay, so this is a really interesting one. So you kind of have a choice when you're interacting with people. You can say, okay, I'm going to come across where I want to be in the charisma zone. So I want to come across as charismatic, but a little higher in warmth. And that will help you come across as high in warmth, very collaborative, very trusting. And it also is more likely to inspire warmth. right? Our cues are very contagious. So this is down to even vocal power. They've even found that we tend to match the vocal tonality of people in the room that we're with. So people are speaking a little bit higher like this. Have you ever noticed a group of girls together? Their voice always goes up 5 or 6 octaves. That's because they all are mirroring each other with that voice tone. And they're like, hey, how are you? And they go down to their other voice tone. So yes, it is very likely that you coming across with very specific cues can help infect or help those cues be contagious. Not always, right? Not always. If someone is very, very high in competence or very high in warmth, they might not be open to that contagion. They might want to stay in their part of the zone, and that's okay too.
Hey, Vanessa, I saw one question I thought was pretty cool. Will asked, Will, who's been a longtime member of the MOC community, by the way. So shout out, Will. Thanks for all of your awesome contributions. Will said, how do cues impact bias along the lines of race, gender, and age?
Yeah, they absolutely do. So the scientific name for this scale, Dr. Susan Fisk's work, is a fancy title called the stereotype content model. That's actually what this research is called. And there's been many, many studies based on this work. So it's not just one study. It came out originally in 2002, and they've done many backup studies. And they started off looking at stereotypes. What they found was we have stereotypes about certain groups of people's warmth and competence. So very basically, for example, women are typically seen as higher in warmth, whether they are or not, just looking like a woman, whether you are or not just looking like a woman, people are going to assume higher warmth. Typically, but not always, men are seen, whether they are or not, if you look like a man, you're seen as higher in competence. So a lot of these stereotypes are reinforced by these cues, which is why I think this work is so important, is because you need to know the stereotypes that are working for and against you. For example, as a woman on the younger end of the age scale, as a speaker, especially a corporate speaker, I work harder to dial up my competence cues because I want to make sure that people are taking the work seriously. I use a lot more studies. I use a lot more charts. The name of my company is Science of People. There's a reason for that. It's because I'm trying to purposely dial up to work to help myself be taken more seriously. So you're welcome to look up, actually, Google Images is the best way to see this. If you look up stereotype content model race or stereotype content model gender, the results are shocking. They are shocking because they actually studied what we think about women, men, elderly, different races. They even have different nationalities. For example, people view Americans as at a very specific place on the stereotype content model, different than the Swiss or the French or Japanese. And that's because we have different stereotypes of those cultures as well. I think it's really important, especially if you're working cross-culturally, to know what those are. Again, they're stereotypes, not necessarily true. So just be prepared when you Google that. You're going to find a lot of very robust information as you Google it.
You know,
I also saw one other question. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to mention, just while you're gearing up for that second comment, one of the things that's interesting to me is how context probably dictates competence in some regards. So, for example, I've done a lot of work with French companies, and French companies are highly context oriented, meaning they want to give all the I don't mean to overgeneralize, by the way. My experience and what I've heard from French people is they want to give all the background information before getting to the decision of the moment. Whereas America, and so if you fail to provide that context, I would assume they perceive you to be less competent, right? Whereas with Americans, we actually, we've struggled with this even on our team as we interact with the French team, is there's so much context, we feel that they're incompetent because they aren't just getting to the point, right? And so it's an interesting thing to consider that culturally, perhaps the definition of competence varies. And I don't have an answer there, but that's just an observation from my own.
I think it's an interesting way to be more purposeful with your communication, right? If you know where these are, I mean, even if there's 4 different types of cues, right? We talked about 4. So it's not just words, it's also our body language, our gesture, and imagery. You know, a white lab coat immediately increases perceptions of competence, right? Like, even just that can change people's perception. So like, there's all different kinds of imagery. I had that chapter was the longest in the book. My editor was like, it's too long, Vanessa, but it's so fun because a lab coat changes perceptions of competence. A briefcase changes perceptions of competence. Those little political pins, right? A lot of American politicians wear a US flag pin. that changes people's perceptions of competence. So even like these small things, what's in our Zoom background can change our perceptions of warmth and competence. I think that those provide opportunity, I think, right? One, to not be accidental, to make sure that you're doing it purposefully. And then two, that there's all these opportunities to be able to change people's perceptions, I think is really interesting. So Patricia asked a question, I didn't want to miss it, which was, how do cues inform ability to empathize? So empathy is absolutely a warmth derivative or a sibling of warmth, right? So people who are high in empathy are typically high in warmth. Now, there's one caveat to this, which is highly empathetic people can often change their own cues based on the person they're with. So while highly warm people typically are signaling lots of trust and collaboration, they're very open. If they're with a highly competent person and they're very flexibly empathetic, they can dial up to competence to mirror and match that person. And so that can be a superpower and a liability depending on how you use it. So if you're a highly empathetic person, it's important to be aware of your authentic place on the scale. What I mean by that is a highly empathetic person, maybe their default is high warmth, and then they are with a highly competent person and they dial up into competence and they don't feel like themselves, or they're exhausted, or they say yes to too much. So I think it's important to know your boundaries of how far warm will you go and how far competent will you go to still feel like authentically you. So I think that remember that high warmth and high competence helps you come across as highly charismatic. But most importantly, these cues are contagious, that we can inspire charisma by highlighting our warmth and competence. We also can partner with people who have opposite strengths as us. I think some of the best duos in history, the best duos in business, the best duos in media are opposites. Someone is high in warmth and someone is higher in competence. So when you're thinking about business partners or collaboration partners or creative partners, sometimes, yes, it's great to be with people who are similar to you, but sometimes it's great with people who are opposite to you. Because if you're with a highly competent partner or colleague, they can trigger your competence. If you're with a highly warm person, they can trigger your warmth. And so it's not only being purposeful with our cues and trying to inspire those cues, but also choosing the right partners, choosing the right collaborators, and making sure that we're creatively inspiring using warmth and competence, because that helps people be their warmest and most competent selves. So I want to thank you so much for having me. It's been a true honor.